Welcome, everybody, to Disruptive Conversations. And we're moving into Happy Halloween, everyone. I know I didn't come on costume today, but you can pretend that you can be anybody that you want to be. I'm going to have my dogs Penelope and Sammy dressed up so perhaps they can reach trick-or-treaters today. So happy Halloween. Halloween is a very special day in my life, and met my husband at a Halloween party. And you never know what the tricks or treats of life are going to be bringing to your doorstep. So very happy to see you here. Lydia has made her request, and we're going to be going. He's joining us. So happy that you're here. Welcome back, people who have come on before and have been with us, and for all the new people, welcome. And here is Lydia.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
This is wonderful. So, Lydia, I am going to be introducing the show, introducing myself and you, and then our conversation begins.
Wonderful.
So, welcome everyone to Disruptive Conversations with thought leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, auctioneers, musicians, attorneys, in which we deep dive into the experiences these women have needed to navigate and conquer in order to have achieved their personal and professional success up to this point in time. I'm Dr. Risa Reiger, clinical psychologist, and I'm an expert in change. And here's the good news. Positive change can happen at any point in time. You're never too late. And to create positive change, we need to disrupt. We need to disrupt a thought, a feeling, a belief, a habit, an action in order to create our 10.0 lives. And that's what this series of conversations is all about. And today, to help us and to enlighten us on that journey, I have an extraordinary woman, Lydia Fenet. And in addition to everything that she could do, she also was able to suggest a luncheon spot for me tomorrow when I didn't know exactly where to go. So she
Always.
really has
If
the
you need a
full
rec,
skill
just let me
set.
know.
Full skill set. Okay,
Nice.
so Lydia is a globally recognized auctioneer, author, podcast host, and public speaker. She's the founder and CEO of Lydia Fenet Agency, a boutique agency in class charity auctioneers. And within her first year, she raised over $100 million for nonprofits. That is a good thought to have every single night before you go to sleep, that this is a kind of impact that you can have in the world. So she has worked with alongside Bruce Springsteen, Hugh Jackman, Elton John, Matt Damon, and Jerry Seinfeld to raise record-breaking donations. And in addition to that, her books are The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You. That is a great title.
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
going to
crowd
bring
pleaser
you
for
on
sure.
board to
A real
help me
showstopper. Yeah.
to help me brainstorm mine
Mhm.
and claim your confidence. And those books, just the titles of which are so compelling. And that's what we need to be able to do, and to be able to think of ourselves in that way. So in addition,
Oh my
Lydia
gosh, you do not
is
have to read this entire bio. This is so long.
no,
Good Lord. It's
no.
fine. You can just ask me questions. I can answer them.
Okay. So, and there's more. And there's more. And Lydia, in addition to all of this, Lydia is also a mom
Mhm.
and is here with us today. So we have this extraordinary opportunity to spend time with you, learn more about your journey and what you can share with us. So welcome, Lydia. Is there something that I haven't mentioned on your bio that you
No, I feel like we're all set on all fronts.
okay?
Absolutely.
So, Lydia, you have an extraordinarily varied set of experiences. And what is it that you needed to disrupt in yourself in order to have achieved what you have up to this point in time?
Well, I think that there were so many things growing up, and even as I was in my 20s and 30s, that I always thought I was supposed to be doing something. I was always supposed to be doing exactly, frankly, what I was doing. And actually, on this day 3 years ago, we were in a car accident as a family. And it almost seems like my life shifted after that, where my focus had always been on was I doing the right thing? And even if I wanted to do something else, I was always really focused on trying to sort of fit into this box that I'd created and this image of what I was supposed to be doing. And after the car accident, it was almost like everything had gone so crazily awry so quickly. It just felt like this big wake up call for life that I needed to be like living the life that I wanted to live, not the life that I thought I was meant to live. And that freedom in the past 3 years since that accident has allowed me to do all of the things that I've always wanted to do. You know, I worked for a company for over 2 decades that I loved. When I was there, it really very much felt like a family. And the entire time I was there, I always felt like I needed to be this certain person while I was there. You know, everything fit in the box that I created at the job, but also the larger box of the company. And then after I left, all of a sudden it just felt like I had nothing but blue sky and opportunity, which I'd been craving for a long time in that job. You know, I'd written my first book while I was there, and I often say it was almost becoming like a dress that I really loved that no longer fit. And I felt like I was kind of just pushing on all sides, trying to get out of it, but I didn't know how to leave. I didn't know how to say goodbye to something that I had really fundamentally grown up in. And the car accident for me was sort of the shift that made that all happen, because after that I no longer really cared about anything. I was sort of like, oh, we get one life, it's short, might as well do it the way we want to do it, right? And so I ended up leaving, I guess it was 2022. I stayed on as an ambassador for a year, really to sit out my non-compete. And then the minute it was done, I launched an auctioneering agency, which really was just filling a white space with something that I love more than anything. I mean, if you were to ask me when I'm happiest, it's where I was last night, like on a stage in front of 500 people raising money for a nonprofit. There's nothing that gives me that high. There's nothing I love as much. And there's nothing that makes me feel as good when I get off stage, because I know that every dollar that I raise is going to fundamentally change the life of someone, whether that be through cancer research or last night through, food in a food pantry. And so that passion for me allowed me to sort of expand into these other things like speaking. And, we were discussing this before, podcasting, the ability to talk to people and hear their stories. All of these skills that I've learned on stage are just things that are very easily able to go into pretty much any other industry. And so really for me, it's just punching in all directions and seeing what's fun and what I like to do, and then moving energetically towards those instead of kind of restraining myself and being like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be that person. It's like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. If you don't like it, it's fine. Just don't worry. It's going to keep going. So if you don't like it, get off the train.
That is such a profound and fundamental shift of one getting out of your shoulds
Mm.
and then also figuring out what you want your pivot to be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you said it well, that you have to figure out what your pivot should be, because what I see around me now, and historically, even with so many of my friends, are these highly accomplished people who think they should be doing something, and therefore they don't do what they really want to do. And that is the most important part of life, that we're living life authentically, because otherwise you spend your whole life looking around thinking like, am I doing the right thing? Like, what is the right thing? This is your path. So if you feel like you're doing the right thing, then you are doing the right thing. It may not always work out. I mean, certainly I can give you 100 examples of that, but you learn from that too.
The learning for what doesn't work out, I think, is such crucial feedback to yourself
Mm-hmm.
of when something doesn't work out. Who is showing up inside of you to manage, navigate, and be present for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's 100% right. And the other thing I would say is that the interesting thing about trying things that don't work is the more you do it, the less of a hit you take. And I tell this story in The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You about, in I think it was Simon and Schuster had come up with the idea of having case studies. So I would write a chapter and then I would send the chapter to different women and then ask if they would write, 100 to 150 words. And I remember thinking, and this is my delusional optimism that has accompanied me my entire life. I remember thinking, Oh, well, the book is called The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, so everyone's going to want to be in it. So I'll send this to everyone and everybody will say yes immediately. Not the case at all. And I sent out the first request for a case study to a very well-known anchor in America. I mean, everybody knows who she is. And
I'm not hearing you.
I said, I felt like we had gotten along and, I just was sure she would do it. And within 10 minutes, I got a reply. She's like, listen, I'm really sorry. I can't because contractually, I'm not allowed to do things like this. And it really felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. And all of a sudden I had that fear like, oh my God, what if no one can do this and nobody wants to be in it? And so that first one really was the gut punch. And what I realized after that was, I think two more, Barbara Corcoran came back and said she would do it. So that felt like an amazing win. And then after that, it was just, I didn't care anymore. And so what I've really learned with the failure piece is that you kind of have to get over that first fear of failure, and then the rest of it just it doesn't even register anymore. It's like a little road bump. The first one's the big one. So as long as you keep doing things that make you feel a little uncomfortable, things that you're scared you might not be able to do, you're going to get over that and you're going to have an ability to move forward a lot faster. And that is certainly what I've learned over the past 3 years.
It's important, that we have a fear of how devastated we're going to be.
Yes.
And we anticipate this level of devastation. It sounds like what happened with you, that you went from, well, if this is a great thing and everybody's going to want to do it, to, oh my gosh, what if nobody wants to do
Yeah.
it?
Like,
You
oh
know?
God, this might not be, well, maybe there will not be a single case study. I mean, I think I had a list of 120 people and there are 35 case studies. So that will show you. Most people are like, I don't write and I don't want to write 150 words for a person I've never met before, which is fair.
Mhm.
Um, on the flip side, I feel like anyone who ever asks me to do anything for their books, I'm always like, of course, because I know what it's like to be on the other side of that email.
Yes. One of the things I must say that I'm noticing, that I knew was going to happen, but I'm just really noticing it now, is how precisely you can speak quickly.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yes.
I can get a lot of words
You
into a
get a you
sentence for sure.
you get a
People will
lot of.
say to me that like they're like, I've already finished all of my questions and we've been on for 5 minutes. That's the problem with being an auctioneer. It's true.
Oh no, we have plenty to talk about. I'm not worried about that for a nanosecond. But that you do it very, very clearly. I'm understanding every single word you're
Oh,
saying, and
good.
you're
I'm glad.
really
I'm glad to hear that.
getting that in. But I'm really thinking about it. I don't know if I remember there was a time. Do you remember when they had the trapeze place on the west side,
Oh, yeah, they still
right at
have it.
Hudson,
I love
right?
that place.
And
Yeah.
I went there and I went on the trapeze and I was trying something, and I was really scared. First of all, I'm petite. I don't have the reach
Hmm.
that a lot of people have to really hold onto the bar when it's that far in front of you. And I fell. And
Wait,
after
did
that,
you fall? You fell between, you didn't reach the bar, you fell, or after you fell off the trapeze?
I think I fell
Oh,
afterwards. There are many
okay.
opportunities to
I
fall.
was like, oh, that's
And
horrible. I feel like going for the bar. That's a long fall.
yeah, well, this was a long fall too. But I dropped, I fell. And once I did that, and there was something very liberating about saying, well, if this is the worst it is, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we have this anticipation of it being that much more difficult. And I'm thinking about when you're talking about yourself being what you called yourself, a particular kind of optimist,
Oh,
and
delusional
a
optimist.
delusional optimist.
I just always think everything's going to go well. I'm always like, everything's going to work out.
Well, I think that really, if we looked at that a little bit more closely, Lydia, that there are probably places where you're not that delusional optimist, and it depends on what the risks
Yeah,
are.
maybe.
And when you're doing your own internal risk assessment, and you're thinking, you make decisions differently about that level of optimism. when
Yeah.
you're when someone can just say no to you, and it's not someone's health, wellness, life on the
Hmm.
line, that's not just big risk. And so there's the space to have that level of optimism.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
So I would think that maybe you want to rethink that a little bit, because it sounds to me that in the places of low risk, that you're willing to be all
Mhm.
in.
That is absolutely true.
Okay. Okay. So how did you, how did you get into auctioneering?
I know. I feel like
I
that's a
can't help
question
it.
led by, are you a cattle auctioneer? I started working at Christie's auction house when I was in my early 20s. And I remember I was working in the events department. And I remember seeing a lot of the auctioneers who would take auctions, art auctions. And then at night, because I was in the events department, we would accompany a lot of them to charity auctions. And there were a number of them who would sort of say, as they were waiting backstage, like, I hate this. This is the worst. This is the worst thing. I would never do this. And I always remember thinking, like, I think it would be really fun. I had a theater background in the sense that this is every singer would ever tell you this. I sang in the church choir for like my entire childhood, which is, your choir rehearsal all the time. And then when I was in high school, I sang in the a cappella group and I sang in the school choir. And so I was always sort of performing. I loved being in theater. I loved being on a stage. And I think there's a point at some point in your kind of, as you're transitioning into an adult, where you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm not Broadway level, right? And I'm not going to be the next, I don't know, Britney Spears, obviously. So where does that go? That performative, that love of performance, where does it go? And the answer, I think, for most people is kind of nowhere. I just happened to stumble on a job that at that time, most of the auctioneers who were taking them were taking more like art auctioneers. And there were some that took them with a lot more performative, more of a performative style. And I remember thinking, like, if I ever got that chance, that's what I would do. I would definitely lean more into that. But there's something between saying it and then actually doing it. And kind of going back to what I said about being in that box, I've always had a very dry sense of humor that I think my best friends would tell you comes out, if we're at dinner, it all comes from, frankly, growing up with siblings. It's like, whoever can just completely make everyone else laugh is the one who wins, always to this day. And so I remember thinking, this is such a fun thing. And I tried out and I made it. And I got on stage and I was not good. Like I just wasn't good. I was really stiff because that's what the art auctioneers look like. And because I was one of very few women, I already felt like every time I went on stage, people were kind of like, wait, you're not even the person who's supposed to be up there. So it felt very uncomfortable. But another thing I always tell people is like time is an amazing thing. And if you stay the course with anything, you learn, right? And if you're willing to learn, you can get better. You may not be the best, but you can get better. And I mean, I put in the hours, there were a lot of auctions that nobody wanted to take. And so I just started picking those up and everybody knew that I would take them. So they would give me more. And I worked in the events department. So the auctions were coming in. So I would just take the ones that I knew no one would take. And all of a sudden I'm on stage sometimes like 4 nights a week, sometimes 5. I mean, it got to the point where it was like every single night I worked in the events department, we would be done at 8 and I would leave, change into a cocktail dress in my office and then just go straight on stage. And so I just got a ton of practice. But again, never really that good, just very mediocre. And I had this story that I told in The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, where I went out, I'd gone out really late the night before. I think in the book I told everyone I was like sick because again, I was trying to fit into this box where nothing had ever, like I wasn't naughty or doing anything wrong, but actually I was just super hungover. Like I'd gone out so late and I was dying, like literally dying. And I can remember calling my boss at the time and being like, is there any chance you could take that? He's like, no one takes Saturday auctions, Lydia. Like everybody's doing other things. And so I crawled to the Central Park boathouse on my hands and knees and I got there and I just didn't have enough adrenaline and I didn't have enough, like I didn't have anything. I'd left in the tank. I'd been kind of sick all day. And I just kind of took it the way I would take an auction in front of my friends, as opposed to me being like this sort of very stiff, formal auctioneer who was standing there taking the increments the way that you take them if you're selling a Picasso. Like that's not what charity auctioneering is. And the crowd reaction was so different that all of a sudden, I mean, we're hundreds of auctions in. I had seen a lot of really bad nights on stage, and all of a sudden I had a crowd that was kind of eating out of my hand. And I thought to myself, like, oh, this is what people want. And it was funny because it felt at odds with what I'd been sort of taught. And aside from a couple of the other auctioneers, really what I'd seen on stage. I thought that people wanted me to come in and sell things in a very stiff and formal way. I was wearing like a black suit. And over the next sort of 12 years of auctioneering, maybe even more, um, my style just went heavily into comedy. And now, people they wait for it. Like I get on stage and they are like ready for the jokes. They are ready to be torn apart and like, in the spirit of getting money to the nonprofit, and they love it. And it's so funny and it's so different. And I love it because it's so fun. You know, it's like I get on stage and I get to have this sort of moment where I look at an audience and create this performance. And the net is that a nonprofit is going to get money. And there's nothing that I can think of that's better than that. So that's kind of how it all started. And that's how we got to where we are.
I love that in your family. I'm sure, that the competitiveness
Oh my
took the
gosh.
form of humor. I'm sure
Still
probably came
does.
out in
It
other
still does.
ways also,
Yeah.
but but that but that humor was one of the ways of doing it. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And the other thing I want to comment on, that people sometimes become, women in particular become kind of feel down about it, is that sometimes, you're doing something and that, it doesn't work out, and then you have to move on to something else, or you do choose to move on to something else, and you think, oh, I've wasted all that time doing whatever.
Yeah.
And what I've gleaned, and I'm hearing from you, is that, whatever you have learned up to this point in time, is you may not know how it's going to happen, but it's going to serve you.
Always, always. And I feel like that I have a PR team and I say that to them all the time. When I remember when
Mhm.
we were trying to pitch for this big show when my second book was coming out, and the answer was no. It just came back. It was like, no, it's not going to work out. And they were so disappointed because they were just like, oh, and I was like, guys, if it's not going to happen today, it's going to happen. I'm just not working in the right direction. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not asking the right questions. And sure enough, 2 months later, I put together a pitch, sent it in through a different avenue, and ended up in this huge feature on, America's most watched morning show. And I said to them afterwards, I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you can never look at an opportunity, you can never look at anything you've spent your life doing or working towards, that it's not going to ultimately lead to something else. It may just not look the way you thought it was going to look. I
Mhm.
worked at Christie's for 23 years. People are always sort of like, why aren't you an art auctioneer? Why aren't you an art auctioneer? And to be truthful, when I first started at Christie's, the way that I saw the auctioneering program, it was sort of like if you worked at Christie's and you were a woman, you could take book sales. None of the evening sales, none of the glamorous sales with the packed sale rooms were ever taken by women until 2020, truth be told. And
Wait a minute, hang on, hold on, moment, please. That we're talking about 4 years
oh,
ago.
yeah, from 1766 when the company was started until 2020. And it was only because of 2020 that it happened. And it wasn't that there was no place to go. And because I was on stages at such a young age in New York City, I by the age of 31, I was on stage at Madison Square Garden next to Bruce Springsteen and Jerry Seinfeld. I was like, I don't need your dusty old book sale. Like, I'm good. And in my last year at Christie's, I was training to be an art auctioneer and ended up like leaving because of the accident and everything, maybe a month before I finished the class or the approval process. And so I never took an art auction when I was at Christie's my whole time. And instead, like a month after I left Christie's, I was approached by a car company that was leaving Sotheby's. It was half of the Sotheby's car company, and they were forming their own car company. And they said, we really want you to be our principal auctioneer. And I was sort of like, what? Like I sat through the lunch, like these people are completely out of their minds, but okay. But I'm always willing to take a meeting because I always love things that are completely bizarre. And I love being the first to do things. I love being like the first woman to do something because I'm not scared. Like that's what charity auctioneering taught me. Like I have no fear about anything anymore. And so I did it. I went out to California for their big sale. It was, as someone said to me, one of the 1,000 men in the audience said to me afterwards, he's like, way to start at the Super Bowl. He wasn't kidding. It's like 1,000 people seated at this auction, and I'm the only woman in the car world doing it. And I said to my husband before, like, I don't know, this is 50-50. It's either going to be a real bomb or it's going to go really well. And I cannot tell you what is going to happen in the next 4 hours. And I did it. And it just became this unbelievable right turn in my career that has been such a fun, challenging, exciting part. And, I happen to have backed the car company that is literally a rocket ship to the moon. It keeps doing better and better and getting bigger and bigger. And again, people are like, cars? I'm like, I don't know, but it's really fun, So I think, it's the unexpected things, it's the pivots in your life, it's those moments that you could never in a million years expect that happen as a result of taking risks. And I would always have thought that the end trajectory would for me have been like, at some point I'll start taking art auctions at Christie's. At some point I'll take that evening sale. But like, whatever, you know, it all went in a different direction and I couldn't be happier. So it's interesting the way that life pivots. And Martha Stewart wrote in my first book, she did a case study and she wrote, you know, success seldom comes in the form that you think it will. And I repeat that to everyone because I think that is the truest statement. You think it's going to look like this, you have no idea. Just keep going forward.
What I'm hearing from you also is you've used the word challenge a
Yeah.
number of times, and that challenge for you is this place of excitement.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
but we can feel that also.
Yeah.
You know, challenge doesn't mean that, well, I'm ready and I know exactly how to do this. Part of what makes challenge and not just something that I do is that I'm wondering what this is going to be
Yeah.
like. I'm wondering how's it going to go? And also to ask you the too long question, but very clear about that,
Mhm.
is that you seem to get such a kick out of yourself,
I know.
you know,
I
with
really do.
yourself, you know,
I
kind of.
do. I'm like, what happens next? I know. I feel like it's like this storybook and you can just keep adding chapters. I just think life is such an exciting thing. And, you know, it just, there's so much opportunity out there. And if things don't go well and you learn to not let it slow you, it can kind of be like, oof, that was not a great day. But if you can pick yourself back up and keep moving forward, then I mean, what else is there? I think that's the beauty of life, you know, and I think as a mom with my kids, I feel like I'm constantly messaging that to them. Like, oh, you didn't win that? Who cares? Guess what? You're gonna get to try again next week. And also, you guys aren't even that good. So you probably won't win a lot, but it's fine. Like, you're gonna be fine. But keep practicing because you might get better. Like, one day you might win. Probably not on this team, but someday.
And doing that and saying that is not about being a downer or not
Yeah.
about tamping down someone's, you know, someone's aspirations.
Yeah.
That you can be, you know, so much of what we do is in the space of duality,
Mm,
right? So you're saying to your kid, look, you know, though it wasn't goal time last time, the time before that, and it may not be goal time next time either, but that doesn't mean that there can't be.
yeah.
And so this, you know, this kind of an assessment and being able to see that and be able to communicate that and do it for ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And because I've heard you say a couple of times now that, you know, I wasn't that good at it. I really, you know, it really was, that was a thud,
Yeah.
you know. And being able to say that and assess yourself accurately
Yeah.
in that moment, and also say, and I'm going to go on and do better in this, I'm going to
Yeah.
really give this a try.
Isn't that the fun part of it? I would say this to any of my friends who are entrepreneurs that we talk about this a lot, that when you start to find the fun in failure, then you start to try bigger things. You know, I alluded to the car accident. So I had a spinal fusion. I have a steel rod in my lower back. So I'll never be able to touch my toes again. Like it's physically impossible because it's a rod, right? And I've always thought surfing was really fun. I've always loved the idea of it. I grew up on a lake. I'm a mermaid. I will get in the water anytime. And I was like, clearly I should be a surfer. So I'd surfed a few times before the accident, but after the accident, I was like, I am going to be a surfer. So I like signed my whole family up for surf lessons, like 4 days in a row. We go to a surf camp. I mean, I can't surf. I can't bend. It's like I have to paddle with my chin on the board because I don't have the extension anymore. But and I mean, I get annihilated by the waves, but I'm still out there, you know, and I think especially with my kids, always showing them that I'm strong and not weak is very important for me because they were so scared in the accident and sort of getting through that. So I think that's a dual purpose, showing myself I can do it, challenging myself, and also being okay with the fact that I'm never going to be great at it, and that's okay. But also showing them that I'm not afraid to get out there and take a total beating from the waves for hours at a time, which is really what it is.
And it's beyond taking a total beating. It's about what we draw on in ourselves to get back up and try it again.
Yeah.
And that when we have that, I I think, and this is what I'm writing about and what I hold very close to me in my practice, is that that optimism is really the place where you don't know how it's going to
Mm,
go, but you're willing to get on the board. And
mm,
whether you're paddling with your chin on the board or you're able to hold upright, that you're out there paddling and giving it a try. That optimism is really that belief that I'm going to do this some way.
right. Yeah.
And it doesn't end that. What I think is also just to highlight, Lydia, so important in what you're saying is that, there's, first of all, there's nothing called perfection, and
Mm,
that what we can do beats not doing all the
mm,
time. And that what I know for sure is that perfect is a metric that one doesn't exist, and two is absolutely unconditionally the road of suffering. We
okay.
can talk about excellence. Excellence is different than perfect. Excellence we can strive for.
Mm,
Perfect is gaslighting.
yeah. It's also subjective, right? One person's perfect is another person's hell.
That is also, but it's more, kind of as it's more of symbolic
Mm,
than realistic. And that when we can get deep pleasure, even if even if the napkin on the tablecloth at the event, one of the napkins is a little bit
askew.
not right, a little bit skewed. And trust me, I'm the person who's going to notice that. I know who I am.
Well,
So,
it's good. It's good that you know that. It's good that you know yourself.
um, so as we wrap up, first of all, please tell us about your two books and your next disruption.
So my two books are The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You is the first one, which I've talked about a little bit, and then the follow-up is Claim Your Confidence. So it basically starts exactly where the first one left off. It's on my book tour for the second book. And I'm writing on my third book as we speak. It's called Scale Your Skill. So it's about taking an idea, a side hustle or a dream, and turning it into a business. So I write real time in my life. I write as I go. So it's right now stories of things that I'm seeing, working in this entrepreneurial world, growing a business, and all of those things rolled into a book.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to continue conversation. My book is right now is called Baby Book X.
Oh,
Uh,
it always starts off as something.
yes,
Scale your skill might change. You never know. It's like
oh,
three
well,
quarters of the way
yeah,
through.
that's not that it's just the placeholder because there isn't something in place yet. This is an ongoing journey. So, first, I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone who's joined us today. What a conversation! And this disruption is just the ones that we need to hear in our lives. And thank you so much for that. And so Lydia can be found on Instagram.
Mhm.
And if you haven't tuned in before, welcome. Please stay along with us. And remember, I'm dropping important information every week. And if you've missed, couldn't hear all of this, and you know somebody who needs to hear this, let them know. It's going to be living on my reel. It's going to be living with Lydia. And so you haven't missed it. There's information you're definitely going to want to go back to and hear again. Lydia and I now need to do our cover shot.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to do
Yes, let's do
little
it.
fluff
Let's
and ready.
try to get less dark. Yeah.
Okay. And one more. Thank you so much, everybody. See you next time. And remember that you're never too late. Positive change can happen at any point in time. See you next week. And I've saved a seat for you.